Hello and welcome to another tips and tricks video, and in this one we are going to make this image switcher, and you can see you can click on left and right arrows to get to the proper image, and you can get the feedback, visual feedback at the bottom. Of course you can click on these dots to go through those images as well. So this is done by HTML, CSS and JavaScript, so no library. And I want to make this video a bit longer. It might get a bit longer than usual because I want to explain in detail what's happening, especially on the JavaScript side. And the reason for that is when I started learning all about these sliders and JavaScript, all the videos I found on the internet, they were just showing me what to do and not explaining why or how is this going to happen. And they have their own ways of doing it. So they were useful, but I was still confused. So I had to figure out things by myself, which took a lot of time. And I thought I have to make a video myself and explain in detail what's going on. And I hope this is helpful. So let's dig in. I have my folder open and I have nothing in it except the images and the arrows. So as you can see here. So I'm going to create the files first, index.html for our HTML file. I need a CSS file, so I'm going to call it main. Also a JS file, which I'm going to call it main. So these are the three files I need, and I'm going to start with HTML, of course. So let's get the boilerplate and let's call it JS image switcher. We can call it whatever we want, of course. So the first thing I want is a wrapper that goes around everything. So the whole slider or switcher. And within that, I will have another div with a class of slides which will contain all the divs that I want. So I'm going to use divs and give them style background image. So I found it easier to work with the image in this way. I mean, of course, we could use image element, but I really prefer it this way. So I'm going to use the images I have here. All right. So I'm going to copy paste this 5 times because I have 5 images. So you can, of course, do the same. This code will be, the source code will be in the GitHub repo, which will be linked in the first comment. So I'm going to make a comment up here and say images or slides, whichever. Now, initially, when the page loads, one of them should have a class of shown. I'm going to call it shown just because it's shown on the screen. And then with JavaScript, we will switch these classes. Now, underneath the images wrapper or slides, let me change this since I'm calling that slides, so the comment should be slides too. Now I'm going to create the buttons, and I'm going to create a div with the class of btns. Within that, we will have 2 buttons, which the first one will have an ID. I'm sorry, I thought it CSS ID of for previous, and the next will have an ID of next. Now I have these 2 arrows, SVGs. So one is left. I'm just going to copy it and add it here, and get the right one and add it here. And let's save it, refresh this page, and there we go. So we could use these SVGs within an image element, but again, it's SVGs. We don't need to do it. It's already an element. So all we need now, it's the dots, right? So the dots that goes in the bottom, and I'm gonna create a UL for this one. We could use a div again, but it's your preference. UL with the class of dots. Within that, we will have LIs, 5 of them, and I just used the VS Code syntax. And again, just like the images up there, or slides, sorry, just like the slides, initially, one of these will have a class of active. So going back to the demo, as you can see, when the page loads, the first one is gonna active. Okay, let's go back to the project. So we're good with the HTML. All I want to do is to link my script. So bring in this script source and also link the CSS in the head element. So main CSS. All right, we're good for now, I think, with the HTML side of it. Let's jump to the CSS. I'm gonna close this one. We don't need to see it. And the first thing I want to do, I want to reset my CSS by saying padding 0, margin 0, and box sizing, oopsie, box sizing border box. That's it. So for the wrapper, which goes around everything, we will have a width of, let's say, 1200 initially, or as a fixed width, and we will have a max width of 85 view width. So it doesn't go more than 85% of the screen. And we will have a height of 700 pixel. Now, for the height, if we give it a, let's give it a view height. So I'm going to give it 70% of view height. Maybe that's too much, 60, because this makes it more responsive. Now, again, you can play around with these numbers to get the right size you want. Let's give it a background to the wrapper so we know we are working there. There we go. Let's go back under height property. I'm going to add the margin. So you can see it's very stuck to the edges. So I'm going to say 2 rem from top and bottom and auto left and right, which will center that wrapper, that div. I'm going to give it a border radius. So 15 pixel, and a box shadow I want to give, which I will get it from Tailwind CSS. So I'm using this box shadow medium. So I'm copying that one back to the project, just pasting it. There we go. And all we have to do now, just add the position relative. And I'm going to add it up here, position relative, because within this box, everything will be position absolute. So also you can see I can see these. So what I can do, I can say overflow hidden to make sure nothing goes out of this box. And you can see it's already cutting out those buttons too. So that's all for the wrapper. Let's start with the slides, right? We called it, oops, sorry, it's here. We call them slides, right? We don't need to actually do anything on the wrapper itself. We just want to say, go to the slides and select all the divs and give them width of 100% and height of 100% and background size. So they have a background, right? So we can say background size cover. Right now, it's not coming up because we have to say position absolute. Oops, absolute. Top 0, left 0. There we go. There's the image. So I'm going to remove that red background now because we don't need it anymore. So for now, we're good with this one. So this is applying to all the divs here, right? Now, one of them has the shown class. Let's target that one. So I want to repeat this, right? And say div with the class of shown. Okay. So make sure this is a space, but here there is no space because I'm saying the div that has the class of shown should have a opacity 1. And the reason is because initially all of them should have an opacity of 0, except the one with the class of shown, which we will change it with JavaScript. Now this should have a transition because it will be a snappy if we don't do it. So I'm going to just do the transition on it on the divs themselves. So I'm going to say 0.5 second and linear. That's it. There we go. That's the transition. And we're good with the slides. And let's go. I'm not making a comment here because it's clear where I'm working. So up next we have the buttons. So div with the class of BTNs. Again, these should have a position of absolute. Now from the top, because we want to center them, we're going to say top 50%. And you can see it comes down, but this is not quite right. So I want to use transform, translate y minus 50%. There we go. This will center it perfectly. I'm going to give it a padding of top and bottom 0, left and right 30 pixel, so it will push it in a little. Give it a display of flex and justify content center. And of course, width should be 100%, so it goes all across. I'm sorry, a space between this one. Space between, not center. There we go. So now let's target the buttons themselves. So within the BTNs class, which is a div, we have 2 buttons, right? And first we want to remove the border, no border. I want to give it a background of white, just simple white. And actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's use RGBA and 255, 255, 255, and 0.7. Okay, and because we want to add a hover effect, so I want to give it a width of 50 pixel, height of 50 pixel, border radius of 50%. That'll round it up, and you can see the arrows are not centered, so I'm just going to use display grid and place items center. Oops, why didn't center? Why is it not working? There we go. So I could use flex, or we could use other methods to center it. This is easier with just 2 lines. And what else do I want here? I think, okay, so the last thing I want, the cursor should be pointer. Now we just want to add the hover effect, so grab this same thing, add it here, add the pseudo selector, hover, and we're gonna say this one should have a background solid of FFF. Bam, bam. All right, we're good for that one. Next we have the dots, so let's target that. So the class of dots. Again, at this point, what element we are using, it doesn't really matter. We could use divs here for all of these. So for the dots, again, the position, absolute, width 100%. From the bottom, this is absolute from the bottom. I'm going to say 50 pixel. Maybe I will change it. We'll see. Let's give it a background so I know where I'm working. Oh, it's too high. So I'm going to say 30 pixel. So I'm going to give it a display of flex. So the items within it will be flex and justify content center. And I'm going to use a gap on here and say maybe 15 pixel. I will, well, that's too little. Let's see, 30. That's good. We could use margin on the dots themselves or the LIs, but again, this is preference. So I'm gonna target the LIs now. Let's get rid of those dots first. So that's a list style, but by default, we're gonna say none. Let's give it a width. So if I save it, they're gone. Width of 10 pixel, height of 10 pixel, and the border radius of 20 pixel. There we go. Let's give it a background of white. There they are. And again, we need the cursor pointer on this. So cursor should be pointer on these two. So, all right, we're good. Let's get rid of that red background. There we, and that's it. So again, just like the slides, we see one of them have the class of active. So we want to say if the li has the class of active, what should happen? It just has to be bigger, right? So we want to say the width should be 30 pixel. There we go. So for this one, we need the transition as well, because again, when you click on it, you want it to be a smooth transition. So I'm going to say 0.3 second for this one, and also linear. Same thing, it's just a millisecond different. Okay, let's start with the good part, which is the JavaScript. Now, we're almost, I think we're done with the CSS completely. Let's jump to JavaScript. The first thing we want to do, I grab all the things I need. So I need the slides, I need the buttons, and I need the dots. So let's grab them, and I'm going to start with the slides. So within our JS file, I'm going to create a variable and call it const slides. So all the slides, which will use document query selector all. And these are within this slides class, so all the divs. So I'm going to make a comment as I'm going along, making comments. So it would be easier, especially when you, for example, if some of you get the code from GitHub, so you can see what's going on. Elements, DOM elements. Okay, so and of course, along the road, we're going to console.log everything we get. So you can see, if I bring up this one, zoom in, when we use query selector all, it gives us a node list, which is similar to an array. So we can use array functions on it. So that's quite nice. So for example, if I say length, there we go, 5, because remember, it is 0 based indexed, right? So even though it is 5, the index is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's go back there, and you can see it says 5, but you can see the index here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we need to keep this in mind when we apply our logic. The length is 5, but the index is 4, the last index. Okay, so let's grab the buttons. So const, I'm going to call it priv btn document dot query selector. There's only one, so this one had an ID of priv, and I'm going to copy paste this and select this priv and the next one and just call it next. There we go. By the way, you can see I'm not using semicolon because I just go like this, and then when I format my document, it will automatically add it. That's why I don't use it. But it is recommended to use all the time so you know where the code ends. The last thing I want is the dots. So I'm going to call it dots, of course. And again, document. This one again should be query selector all. And we're going to say get the dots. So go to the dots and get all the LIs. There we go. That's all the elements we need. So again, we have the buttons, we have the slides, and the dots. Let's go down, see what's happened. What do we need to do first thing? The first thing we want to do is to attach click events to these buttons, especially left and right. So I'm going to start with the next one because it's easier. So I'm going to grab that one and say add event listener, of course, and listen for a click. Let's pass in the function. I'm going to use the arrow function, and I'm just going to console.log something. So I'm going to console.log, I don't know, slides. Doesn't matter. So if I click on it, we get the slides because the click works. That's the point. So you can see here that I'm getting the divs, and first one has the class of shown. So if we only get the first one, so this is an array, of course, we can use this, what do you call these, brackets, and then give the index. So I want the first one, it means the index is 0. So again, if I click on this, now I'm getting the element, only that one element. So the key here is we want to remove this class shown and add it to the next one. So here we have the class shown. We want to take this away and add it to the next one. Let's try to do that. We could say, again, slide. So, sorry, I'm trying to go slow and explain what's happening. So this video might get long, as I said before. So we could say slides, grab the first one, and then go to the class list and remove the class shown, and then go to the next one, which is the index 1, add the class instead of removing it. So, but of course this is wrong, but to show you what's happening, you have this image. If I click, we have the next one, and you can see we are logging the first one that the class of shown is gone. So if we inspect the elements, we can see within our slides div, we have the second one with the class of shown down here. Now, this is not the right way, because again, if I click, this is not going to happen. It will just repeat the same code. What we want to do here, essentially, grab all of these, right? All of these. Remove the shown class from all of them. So we don't really care which one has the shown class, at first. It could be the third one, it could be the last one. We want to remove all and then add to the next one. Okay, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So for that, we need actually something to track what's going to happen. So, or to track the index of the images or the slides or where we are. So I'm going to create a variable, call it with let, of course. I'm going to call it current idx, short for index, and I'm going to set it to 0 at first. So again, the first index is 0, so I'm going to set it to 0. What we want to do when we click on this one, we want to add 1 to this, so it goes to the next, to the next, to the next. So I want to say, when I click on this one, the current index plus plus, which means add to it. So every time I click, add 1 to it. And instead of using these, manual numbers, I'm going to use the index here and here. Now, right now, right now I'm saying the slide with the current index, which is 0, remove it, and then add it, which is, again, not going to happen. Nothing going to happen. If I move this down here, I'm going to say remove the shown, which is 1, right? From the index 0, which is the 0 index, and then add to it, which will become 1, and then slide with the index of 1 would have the shown class. So I'm gonna log two things. So the current index as well as the slides. So let's see what happens. This is again for practice to show what's going on. Let me make this bigger. Come on. Okay. Because we want to just see what's going on. And just a very small tweak, because we said 60, I want to say 80. I want to just make it easier for us to see. Okay. So again, let me copy this and paste it up here. So we want to console.log before these things happen and after these things happen. Okay, let's click and see what happens. And in fact, I'm sorry, again, I want to create some line under it so we can distinguish if we click again. Okay, so look at this, click here. So we are getting the node list, of course, because I said do this, but we're getting the 0 index because at first it's 0, right? And then what it does, it will remove the shown class from 0 slide, from the slide with the index of 0, add 1 to it, and then goes to the slide with the index of 1 because right now it's 1, right? You can see here it becomes 1, and adds, you can see here in the first log we have the first div has the class of show. In the second one, the second div has the class of shown, and of course we are separating. Now let's click again. There we go. 1 becomes 2, of course, and the shown class is moving. Now, this is actually what we want, but there is a problem again. Let's see what happens. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. Now, we are not saying to stop. We are at any point, we are not saying to stop. So this goes beyond number 4, which is the last index of our images. So there is no slide with the index of 5. That's why we get this error. Let's reload. Okay. Now again, this is also, kind of, we are repeating ourselves. We could say, for example, we could add an if here. So we could check before adding to it. We can say if the current index, okay, so we want to check if the current index is bigger or equal to the slide's length. Remember before we got the length and it gave us 5. Now, and I said we have 5 elements, but the last index is 4. So we want the last index. So what we have to do is just say -1, which will be 4, right? So we are saying if the current index, which is this one, at any point, if it becomes 4 or greater than 4, so because we are saying greater or equal, right? So when it hits 4, what should happen? We want to say again, set it to 0. There we go. But as long as that requirement is not met, just add 1 to it. So let me format the code. Again, we are saying if the current index is greater or equal to 4, which is this one, set it to 0 or reset it. Otherwise, add 1 to it. So let's do it again. At first it's 0, of course. If I click, we get 0, 1. We go to the 1, and the slide goes to the 1. Go to the 2, 3, and you can see the shown class is moving, right? 4, there we go. Because it was 4, now the requirement is met here. So this condition evaluates to true, therefore the current index becomes 0 again, and we are back to the first slide. There we go, that's it. And the right click is already working. Now there is a better way to do it. Instead of repeating myself here 2 times, and there is a way to remove the class from all of this, and that's done with a for each loop. So we can loop through these elements easily, and just remove all of these. I know it's just one line of code, but to make sure there is no shown class on any of these elements, because right now we are just checking one by one. So again, if you are confident this would work, we could use it like this. But again, because I want to explain exactly what's happening and show you the other ways, let's create a function. Okay, let's call it remove shown class. And what it does, it's going to remove the shown class from all the elements. So we want to go into the slides and use a for each loop. The for each loop takes a function as a callback. So, and the first parameter is the, the element within, so the single element within those array or object we're using. So right now we are using an array or a node list, which is similar to array. So I'm going to say slide because I have only one parameter. I don't need to use the parentheses. And I'm going to use the arrow function and say, so get that slide. I'm going to just log it first. So let's log slide to show what's happening. And we're going to call this remove class within this, so within our click event. So just rub it on the top of everything. Okay. And for now, I'm just going to comment everything out, just for now. So we know by default, let me just, in fact, sorry guys, I just want to be very clear. Let me log the slides again before removing. So when I click on this one, see what happens. We get the node list, which is this log, and the first one has the class of shown. Now this function comes in that goes within all of those, and you can see we are logging all the slides, right? So it breaks it for us into individual elements. Now, instead of logging here, I just want to say, before that slide, so that one individual slide, which we are selecting here, just go to the class list and remove that shown class. So this will go over 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And if I do it again, you can see we are getting the slides, of course, up there. And we are getting the individual elements after this function is executed. And you can see the class of shown is gone. So that's basically what we want. Now I'm going to remove this. I'm going to bring all of this back. Okay. So, oops, what did I do? I just wanted to format the code. There we go. So I'm going to make a comment here. Actually, no, because I'm going to change this later on. So I want to start from a simpler point and then get to refactor the code. So we will refactor the code as we go along. So at first, we are removing all the classes. Now, we don't need to do this anymore, right? So I can just delete this. There we go. I don't need this anymore either. I don't need the console log. I need the if because we need to check what's happening. And then we add it to the current index. So we don't need to worry about removing which index we want to remove because this will remove all of them. So, and I don't need this one either. But if I save it, I formatted the document. If I save it and click, this still works. I should get rid of this console.log. Sorry. There we go. I don't need it. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 0 again. Okay, let's do the similar thing for the previous button. And again, I will refactor this code, so don't worry about these so many lines of codes. It will be, again, it will in fact be very easy at the end. So I'm gonna copy this and add just down here. Instead of next, I'm gonna say preview button. Same thing. What we want to do here is going to be exactly the same except the condition because we want to go backwards. So at first, when we click on it, we want to say remove, of course, all the classes, and then do something with the index. So I'm going to close this one for now so we can see this current index, and then add the class of shown to that current index. Now, let's think about it here. This particular if here for me was a struggle. For some reason, my mind wouldn't go backwards, wouldn't work backwards. So, but let's think for a second. We want to say that at first, when the page loads, the index is 0, right? And the current index is 0. The index of the images or the slides is also 0 because we're on the first one. So we want to say if the current index is smaller or equal to 0. again, we want to say that if this index is equal or smaller than 0, so minus numbers and the 0 itself, then what's going to happen? We want to set the current index to the maximum amount of images, which is 5 again, the image's length, right? So we want to say a slides dot length. Again, because this is 5, but the last index is 4, we want to say -1. So again, we are saying if the current index is 0, which at first is 0, then set it to 4, like this. Otherwise, instead of adding to it, just take 1 away. So subtract 1. Subtract, yeah, that's the word, I guess. And that's going to happen. So at first, it's going to go 4, 3, you know, I'm going to again do the log thing. So I want to current index at first, and then I'm gonna get the current index after the if, and also just some line so we can see what's going on. Okay, again, let's click on the previous button, see what happens. So at first the index is 0, so this if statement evaluates to true, therefore the index becomes 4, as we can see here. So right, so this doesn't execute because we are saying do this, and then if we click again, now it's 4, so now this one executes, so it goes down again, again, again. Now it is 0, right? So we are here already. Now the next one is gonna do this. There we go. So this is working too. Again, you see in the next button we are saying go forward, right? And here we're saying go backwards. Okay, I'm gonna delete these console.logs and this one, and I think we're good. Now let's talk about these two ifs here, these two if statements. There is a ternary operator for this, and you might know about this, which basically we can do this in one line instead of this big, if else, right? So a ternary operator works like this. Because we are assigning a value to the same variable over and over, we can just say take the current index and set it equal to the condition we want to have. So this is the condition, right? So we want to say if this happens, so this is our condition. What happens if it's true? We want to set this current index to 0. So this is the first, what do we call it, operator, I would say. And then whatever we put here evaluates to true. If this evaluates to true, then this will be set to the current index, right? And whatever we put after it, so the second operator is the colon, that will evaluate. If the condition evaluates to false, then this will happen. So we want to say current index this. This is not correct, by the way. Okay, so I'm gonna delete this and I'm gonna add a semicolon here. This would not work because when we use an assignment, right, when we are using an assignment operation kind of thing, the right side of the assignment works first, or try to evaluate what's going on here first. So they don't it doesn't work if you say current index plus plus, because at first what is current index and what should I do with it, right? That's what happens. So what we can do, just say +1, right? And if I format the code, we can see now we have one line again. There we go. And the right button still works the same way. Now you could put this in parentheses just to make it clearer. But when I format my code, the prettier that I'm using, prettier extension, removes those parentheses. So I'm happy with it. I'm used to it anyway. So remember, this is a ternary operator in which we will have a condition and a question mark. So after the question mark is what's going to happen if the condition is true, and then we have a colon, and what's going to happen if the condition is false. It's going to happen there. So we're going to do the same thing here down here for our previous button. Again, we're going to say current index equals to, the condition is this one, And if it's true, set the current index to 4 or the image length -1. And if it's false, reduce the current index by -1. So I'm gonna delete this if statement and format the code again. There we go. So okay, so let me make this smaller. I don't like it when it's, come on, put it on one line. But anyway, you can see we still work the same way. Left, right. There we go. I think that's it. That's it for the buttons. Now, we want to actually target the dots now. And first thing, we need to click on these and go to the image, right? So for now, we're going to forget about the dots. So we want to click on these and go to the corresponding image. So we already have the dots up there. So I'm going to push this function down because it's a function we can call it from anywhere. And let's just start with the dots. So let's think what's going to happen first. Let me actually make some comments here because I said I'm going to make comments. So this is the next button click event, and I'm going to just copy it. And down here, this is the previous, did I write that correctly? I think I did previous, I'm not sure. But yeah, this is the previous button click event. So for the dots, what's going to happen? First of all, we have more than one, and we want to attach a click event to all of them, not just one. So we are going to loop through them like this function and then add a click event. So let's go step by step. The first thing I want to do, just log the dots. And we, of course, like the slides, we have a node list. Let's do, what can we do here? So we can say dots dot for each, just like down here. Okay. And the first argument is again the dot, so the singular version of what we have. And then use an arrow function. Let's move this dot in here and do this. And keep in mind, again, this is a node list with 5 elements. So the length is 5, but like the slides, there are 4. The last index is 4. So because it is 0 based. So let's log this dot, and you can see it goes through them. For each dot in the dots, which are 5, we are logging 5 elements that there are li, and the first one has the active class. So first thing, we want to say get every dot and add an event listener to all of them, and this should be a click event, and this should, oops, and the function, what's going to happen when we click on them? So the function that is going to execute when we click on these. So we want to just again log that particular dot we are clicking. So not all of them, just that one. So if I click on the second one, there we go. There is no indication this is the second one because, but you can see the visual feedback by Google Chrome. So this one, if I click this one, this has a class of active. So this is very much like here, what we did here. So we want to say, again, remove the active class from all of them and add it to the one that I'm clicking on. So let's create another function just like this function. And again, don't worry, I will refactor all of this. I just want to keep it simple. So I'm going to say remove active class. What's going to happen? Same as this one, right? Instead of slides, it's going to be dots. So slides going to be dots, and this slide and that slide will be dot. So one more time, we are going into the dots array or node list. We are saying for each dot within it, go within that, and one by one go through them and remove the shown class. Save it. Let's execute or call this function within the event listener. So when I click, this should happen. So if I click on any of these, because we are attaching to all of them, this should go away and all of them should become just a circle. Oh, sorry, I should say active here. My bad. You might have seen that, but I missed that. So we should say active. Remove the active class because they have an active class, not a shown class. So my bad, sorry. One more time. There we go. Now it works. And we have the transition. That's why that was quite smooth. Now, we just don't want to remove it. We want to add this active class to that particular dot. We already know which dot we are clicking because this for each and is already taking care of that for us. So I want to say, remove that log and say dot, the dot that I'm clicking on, class list that add active. So right now it's the first one. The first line is going to take away all of them. The second one is going to add to that particular one that I'm clicking. Let's make it bigger. There we go. There we go. That's what we want, right? So of course, we just don't want to do this. We want to now update the image as we click on these ones. So what do we need to do here? We want to say set the active image or slide, set the index equal to the index of this dot. So right now, we could not use the current index because when you click on these ones, you don't know what's the current index. You could be on this one and then use the arrows to move it around, right? And then the current index will be different because we are using the current index in the buttons. But we are using a for each here, and we have 5 elements on both sides, right? So for each is a powerful function. The first element we are passing is that the element within that node list, right? So that single element, which is in this case, it's an li. Now, we could pass a second argument to this, which will give us the index of whichever element we are clicking. So I'm going to pass I as an index, and let's see what gives us, what that I gives us. So I'm going to log that I when I click on an element, right? So again, we are attaching that event listener to all these dots, so one by one. I want to see what is the index of that dot I'm clicking on. Let's make this bigger. So the first one is the index of 0, of course. The third one, index of 2. And you can see I'm getting the index. So all I have to do now to say set the image, set the slide, and take the index from this I and then make it active. So I'm going to copy this, add it down here, and say instead of using the current index now, use the I index. So use the index of the dot, not the current index variable we used up here. Okay, so let's make a comment here. Dots click event. So I'm gonna log the current index here too, just to see what's going on. So let's take this away for a second. If I click on these ones, you can see we are changing the index. This I is changing because we are clicking on different dots, but the current index is always 0 because we're not doing anything, right? So just wanted to to show you what's happening. Now slides, we want to say take the slides with the index of I, so it could be 3, 4, 1, and then add the class of shown to it, right? And again, we want to make sure before we do that, we remove all the shown classes from all of these. So again, I can call this function here, and I'm repeating myself, of course, but we will take care of it. So the buttons, of course, work the same way. Now let's click on these. There we go. We go to the third image. We go to the fourth. We go to the fifth, the second, and it works fine. Now, the problem here is still have a problem. So I'm on the third image, right, which is the index of 2. Now, the current, remember, the current index is still 0. So let me do that. Let me do at the bottom of this current index. So as I'm clicking on this, it is still 0, right? However, I am on the image with the index of 2, so the third image. So if I click on this, see what happens? So I'm back to the second image. This is my second image, and I know it's second image because I click on them so much. So it has a weird behavior, and what we have to do, I will show you later when we add the feedback exactly what's happening. So you can see the index is not being updated. All we have to do to say, after I click on any of these buttons down there, set the current index equals to I, whatever that I is. So I keep forgetting these semicolons. Okay, so now remember it was always 0. If I click on any of these now, it is 2. So if I click on this one, this becomes 3. And now it works properly. So let's, again, I will show you with the visual feedback when we put these, when we attach the change to these buttons too, just in a moment. So for now, we're good. So the next thing, of course, we want to do when we click on these arrows, we want to have the visual feedback down here. So this should move as we click on these ones. And in fact, this is quite easy because we are already setting the current index as I, right? We are already getting the index. So all we have to do, go to the click events of the buttons, so left and right. First, again, just like the slides, we have to remove all the active classes from the dots and then add, because this is the same logic, right? Sorry, I shouldn't copy this. Copy pasting is not always a good practice. So what I want to do, again, use the dots with the index of current index instead of, there is no I here, we don't have that index here, but we know it's the same thing because we are already tracking it. We have the same logic and it goes the same way because there are the same amount of elements in both node lists. I'm going to say class list add active and format again. So same thing happens here. So again, we remove the shown class from all the images. We remove all the active class from all the dots. We check that the current index is not higher than the length of our images. And then we add the class to the indexes and we add one more. So I'm on number 1. So I click on here, it goes to number 2, 3, 4, 5, back to 1. So we're going to repeat this in the previous button. So we're going to remove the active class, okay, semicolon, don't forget. I'm going to copy this, add it down here. There we go. So this is, again, nothing else. It's just 2 lines to copy pasting. So if I go forward, 2, 3, back to 2, 1. Now, this is what I wanted to show you. If we don't set the current index to I, right now it works properly, right? You see I'm on the 2nd, and if I click on this, it goes to the 4th. If I click on down here, it goes to the 2nd. If go back, it goes to the 1, of course. It works the way we want. Let's comment this out, this one line, and see what happens. So if I refresh, I'm on the first one. I go to the 2nd, 3rd, all right, fine. Go to the 5th one using these buttons, right? Now, if I click on this one, should go to the first one, but it goes back, right? Because now the index is messed up. Because by clicking on this one, I set the current index to 4, I'm sorry, to 4 because the index was 4. And by clicking on this one, I'm setting the index because now this evaluates to true, it's setting it to 0. So it's kind of, it messes up all the logic behind it. And that's the just tiny little code fixes everything. So for now, we're all good. The last thing I want to do, just to refactor a bit, you can see here we have these 2 functions that they are basically the same thing, and I'm calling them over and over again. So what we can do, I can actually just make one function, and let's make a comment, say remove all shown and active classes from slides and dots respectively, of course, right? And I will have a function that says clear all classes. What is this going to do? It's just going to do this in one function. So I'm going to cut this, add it here, and I'm going to cut this, add it here, format it, delete these 2 functions. I don't need it anymore. So we are removing the class from the dots and the slides. Now I'm going to copy it. Instead of calling this 2 times, 2 functions, which I don't have anymore, I'm just going to call it once. So it's already looking better. And that's it. So we are repeating ourselves here too. This could be a function, but that's just one. This is really, because we have only 2 times, you could make it into a function, or you can just leave it as it is. All right, so to check one last time, I'm gonna make this bigger. And you can see again, you can play around with the numbers. We can see it's kind of odd right now because I want it to look big enough for the tutorial. So, but you can see it works fine. It works as expected. And we click on these, we go left and right. Now, the cool thing about this is back here, go to CSS. Now, we're done with the JavaScript. Now, what I personally liked about this myself, because first of all, I kind of came up with it myself. I was kind of impressed by myself. But secondly, the videos that I watched before, they mess with the JavaScript to change the behavior of this. For example, like add, if you want to go left, you add a number of 100 or do this, transform, translate, change the style within the JavaScript. But with this code right here, you can change the style in your CSS without changing the logic. So right now I'm using opacity. You can easily use whatever you want. I can say transform, translate, let's say X at first minus 100%. Okay, and then when the shown class is added, just set it back to 0. Let's see what happens. You can see it's already sliding. Now I understand this is kind of like you can't see what's going on back there. I mean, you can see, so you can add a kind of a background, or you can just play around. You can even use, let's see, I'm going to use scale. So set it to 0 at first, and then here set it to 1. See, kind of funny. So you can get all sorts of funny behaviors. You can change because this is absolute, you can change the values of left and right and so on. You can change, you can transform it with a 3D transform, you can rotate it and all sorts of things without even worrying about you're going to mess up your JavaScript logic. So again, but I personally prefer this opacity, changing the opacity. And you can play with these to make it faster. You can see how quick it changes. This is all preference now, but the logic is just this. And that's it, guys. So I'm gonna do a quick recap here, but if you don't want to, I'm not gonna say anything new. So if you don't want to watch it, you're good. It's fine. But I'm just going to do a very quick recap. So what we are doing here, we are selecting all the DOM elements we want, the slides, the images, these two buttons, and the dots at the bottom. We are setting a current index variable, and we are using let because it's being updated to keep track of where this image is, where the slide is, which index. And then we are adding event listeners to our next and previous button, these two. Within that, first thing we are doing, we are clearing all the classes that are applied to the images and the dots, regardless of where they are, using this function down here. The function goes within the slides node list because it's a node list of 5 items, and the dots as well. And using a for each, we are saying go within each of them and remove the classes, right? Back to the click events. For the next button, we are checking if this current index is higher or equal to 4. And we are getting that 4 by using slides.length minus 1 because a slides.length gives us 5, but the last index is 4. So we are saying if it is greater or equal than 4, then set it to 0. This is a ternary operator. If it is not, add 1 to it. So it goes on and on and on and on. So as we click here, it reaches, I'm sorry, this is the last one. It reaches to 4, so therefore sets it back to 0. There it is. And after this condition is evaluated, we are adding that current index. So whatever number that is, we are using that current index to update the slide and the dots to add that active or shown class. And you can see we get the visual representation or feedback on the screen. Same thing goes with the back button with a different logic because we are going backwards and we are saying if the current index, that one, is smaller or equal to 0. So we don't want it to go minus and we want it to stop at 0. So we're saying if it's 0, then set the current index. Actually, I made a mistake here. Okay, sorry. I don't need this. That's why this was make. So sorry about that. So we're saying set the if this is 0 or equal to 0, set it to the 4. So slide that length -1. Otherwise, just subtract 1. So if I save this and nothing changes, that was a mistake by me, and I hope you are still here because that was a mistake, and I will make a comment about that anyway. And then again, we are saying the same thing: use the current index and add those feedback, those classes. For the dots, what we are doing, the first thing we are doing, because there are 5 of them and we want to attach a click event to all of these, we are using a for each, and we are saying go within that dots and click and add an event listener to all those dots. And the first thing you want to do, again, clear using the same function, clear all the classes, and then make sure that the dot I'm clicking on it has the active class. So add the active class to it. Also, get the slide, the image, with the index of that dot I'm clicking, because they are the same length, the same element, same length and the same amount of elements. Therefore, the index should be the same. So we are saying use that index instead of our current index and add the class shown to the image. And at the end, we're saying you set the current index to that index of the dot. So to make sure when we click on the number 2 button or dot here, therefore the current index is number 2. It's not 0 anymore. It becomes 2. So if I click on these ones, it becomes 3 or becomes 2, 1, and so on. Actually, this is 0, but anyway, that's it, guys. That's all it is. I really hope this has been helpful. Again, I personally had a lot of struggle just figuring this out because there wasn't any clear explanation, especially this backwards thing and these slides, like why would we do this and that. So it was very confusing to me at first, but uh, right now it's fine. And I hope I did a good job, and you guys enjoyed it. And as always, I want to thank you all for your likes, subscribes, views, and shares, and all your support. So it's very encouraging, you guys, seeing you guys liking my videos. And I think I said this before, I'm working on a JavaScript fundamentals or crash course, whatever you want to call it. And soon, hopefully, that will be on too. Anyways, that's it, guys. See you at the next one. Thank you. Bye bye.